My snowman can speak. It's whispering disturbing things. The snow had fallen heavily that day, blanketing the neighborhood in a pristine, glittering white. Everything was silent, except for the crunch of boots, as my little brother Max and I trudged through the yard, bundled up so tightly we could barely move. The world seemed muffled, the kind of stillness that feels almost sacred. Max, being 9 and full of energy, was thrilled by the transformation of our mundane front yard into a playground of endless possibilities. "Let's build the biggest snowman ever," he said, his cheeks flushed with excitement. I rolled my eyes. Biggest ever? That's a bit ambitious. He stuck his tongue out at me before bending down to pack the first snowball. It started small, but soon we were rolling it across the yard, gathering more and more snow until it was almost too heavy to move. The process was slow, our mittens soaked and faces stinging from the cold, but Max wouldn't quit. "It has to be perfect," he insisted. By the time we finished, the snowman was nearly as tall as I was. We gave him coal eyes, a crooked carrot nose, and an old scarf we found in the attic. Then Max insisted on twig arms, meticulously arranging them so they looked like he was waving. As the final touch, Max grabbed a black hat from the garage and perched it on the snowman's head. "He needs a name," Max declared, stepping back to admire our work. "How about Frosty?" I joked, expecting a laugh. Max frowned. "Too obvious. Let's call him Jasper." Jasper. The name stuck, though something about it felt oddly serious. By the time we were done, the sun had dipped below the horizon, painting the snow in hues of orange and pink. Jasper stood tall and proud in the yard, his coal eyes seeming almost alive. I brushed off the feeling as exhaustion. That night, I was almost asleep when I heard it, a faint voice. At first, I thought it was Max talking to himself. He often made up stories for his stuffed animals. But this was different. There was another voice, raspy, low, like the wind scraping against a frozen window. I got up and tiptoed down the hall to Max's room. His light was off, but I could see him sitting by the window, staring out at the snowman. His lips were moving, but he wasn't speaking. He was listening. "Max," I whispered, stepping into the room. He jumped, startled, and turned to me with wide eyes. "He's talking to me," he said, grinning. "Jasper's alive." I laughed nervously. "Don't be silly. Snowmen don't talk." Max shrugged. "He's my friend." I didn't press him further, chalking it up to his overactive imagination. But as I lay back in bed, unease prickled at the edges of my thoughts. Over the next few days, Max became obsessed with Jasper. He spent hours at the window, whispering to the snowman. When I asked what they talked about, Max would smile and say, "Secrets." Every day, Max's behavior grew stranger. He stopped playing with his toys, ignored his favorite cartoons, and barely touched his meals. His eyes had a distant, glassy look, as if part of him was somewhere else entirely. One night, I heard him sneaking out. I watched from my window as he trudged through the snow, stopping in front of Jasper. The snowman's shadow stretched long and dark under the pale moonlight, almost as if it moved on its own. I threw on my coat and boots, rushing outside. "Max, what are you doing?" He turned slowly, his face pale and expressionless. "Jasper says I have to." "Have to what?" I demanded, my voice rising with panic. Before he could answer, the wind picked up, carrying with it that raspy voice again. This time, I could make out the words. "They don't understand you, Max. But I do. Do as I say, and I'll protect you." Protect him from what? I shouted, my voice trembling. The air grew colder, the snow swirling around us like a living thing. Jasper's coal eyes glinted in the moonlight, and I felt an undeniable certainty they were watching us. Max's voice broke, tears streaming down his cheeks. He said, "If I don't listen, something bad will happen to you." I grabbed Max's arm, pulling him back toward the house. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, but I didn't stop until we were inside with the door locked. Max cried himself to sleep, and I sat by his bed, listening to the voice, Jasper's voice, chanting dark, cryptic words that seemed to seep into the walls. The next morning, Max was gone. His bed was empty, his window wide open. Panic clawed at my chest as I raced outside. Max was standing in front of Jasper, his hands trembling as he held a knife. "Max, no," I screamed, running toward him. He turned to me, his face pale and tear-streaked. "He said I have to," he whispered. "He said it's the only way to save you." I lunged, knocking the knife from his hands. The snowman seemed to shudder, its coal eyes burning with fury. The wind howled, and the ground beneath us trembled. Jasper's form began to shift, the snow falling away to reveal something dark and twisted beneath, a gnarled, shadowy figure with hollow eyes that glowed faintly like embers. Its face was jagged and skeletal, its mouth an uneven slash filled with icicle teeth that clicked and chattered as it laughed. It had long claw-like hands that stretched from its body, made of blackened ice that seemed to absorb the light around it. Its torso was hollow, an empty void that pulsed with a cold so intense it burned. The creature loomed over us, its breath visible in the freezing air, curling like smoke around its twisted frame. "Run, Max," I screamed, shoving him back toward the house. But the snow came alive, wrapping around my ankles, dragging me closer to the shadowy monstrosity. Its voice boomed, no longer a whisper, but a guttural roar that reverberated in my chest. "You think you can defy me? I have been waiting, watching, and now you are mine." Max turned, his small frame trembling, but he didn't flee. "Leave her alone," he shouted, his voice breaking. Tears streamed down his face as he grabbed a branch from the ground and swung it wildly at the creature. The snowman turned nightmare recoiled briefly, the branch splintering against its icy form. Seizing the moment, I broke free from the snow's grasp, grabbing Max and running as fast as I could. The wind screamed around us, carrying Jasper's furious howls as we stumbled toward the edge of the woods. Behind us, the creature began to collapse in on itself, its hollow torso imploding. The coal eyes burned brighter for a moment before dimming entirely, and with one final, piercing shriek, it sank into the ground, leaving behind nothing but a circle of scorched, blackened snow. Max and I collapsed under the shelter of the trees, gasping for breath. The forest was silent, the air heavy with the aftermath of what had just happened. Max clung to me, sobbing, his small body shaking with fear and relief. Turning back toward the yard, I half expected to see Jasper reformed, waiting for us. But the snowman was gone, replaced by a jagged hole in the snow where the monster had stood. The cold lingered, though, an unnatural chill that seeped into my bones as if a part of Jasper's presence remained. Max and I never spoke of that night again. But every winter, when the first snow falls, I catch him glancing nervously out the window, as if expecting Jasper to return. And sometimes late at night, I swear I can still hear that whispering voice, carried on the icy wind, promising to finish what it started. And when I dream, I see those coal eyes watching, waiting, biding their time.